Hello and welcome to the KPI Institute's webinar Performance Benchmarking for the Electricity Utilities Industry. My name is Andrei Costa and I will be your host for today along with our presenter Alina Mirtoiu. This webinar is part of a series of free educational materials that aim to enhance the knowledge and know-how of those interested, while also creating a bridge between us as a company and you, our public. The KPI Institute is a research organization specialized in business performance. It operates research programs in 12 practice domains, each linked to a certification course, ranging from strategy and KPIs to employee performance, and from customer service to innovation performance. The KPI Institute continuously builds on its values of best know-how, data and facts, and common sense to achieve its mission of integrating performance as a discipline through research, publications, and, what interests us today, through educational programs such as this webinar. Today, 13 years after the KPI Institute was created, we can proudly say that our products have reached professionals in 5 continents and that our public comprises a worldwide community of 73,000 members online and 28,000 registered companies on smartkpis.com. Today's webinar will offer you an insight on well-known KPIs used in practice by electricity industry companies, and it will be delivered by Alina Mirtoiu, a business research analyst at the KPI Institute. She is also a certified benchmarking professional and KPI professional and is the director of the Center for Performance Benchmarking. Her research activity in the performance management field has resulted in the documentation of 500 key performance indicators examples. As a research analyst, one of Alina's most significant research programs focused on developing a benchmarking study in the utilities sector for 3 major utilities, water, gas, and electricity generation, which comprises worldwide data. This presentation lasts between 30 to 45 minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have during the webinar, as they will be answered at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. Enjoy the KPI Institute's webinar Performance Benchmarking for the Electricity Utilities Industry. Now I would like to invite Alina to begin her presentation.
Hello everyone, thank you Andrei for your presentation, and thank you all for joining the webinar. I hope you will find the discussion useful and interesting, as we will address the current trends and practices in performance management within electricity utilities based on our latest performance benchmarking report series. After presenting the challenges, as you see on the agenda, we will closely analyze the findings for each cluster of KPIs of the measurement framework we recommend, focusing on in-practice recommendations for those KPIs that seem to add value for your particular industry. Through the webinar, we aim to identify the industry's performance level to enable practitioners to activate new KPIs within their electricity organizations, and to emphasize how organizations can generate added value from a benchmarking initiative. Let's start with performance measurement challenges within the electricity utilities. And before that, I want to tell you that basically the aim of this webinar were also the goals of our large-scale project initiated in 2016 by the KPI Institute through its Center of Performance Benchmarking and the Utilities Lab. The name of the report was Utilities Performance Benchmarking Report Series, and this is a secondary benchmarking initiative which contains 6 reports revealing the most common KPIs monitored by utilities companies worldwide and presents their performance result in a comparative manner. There are 3 main industries analyzed, which is water, gas, and electricity. And today we will focus on the non-financial KPIs used by electricity utilities. For this particular report, 70 companies from 40 countries were analyzed in order to give us a better overview. But I also want to tell you that we would highly appreciate your input and feedback. So please let us know by writing in the chat or by sending an email afterwards. which KPIs do you consider as most important for your organization and you would expect to see in a benchmarking study? Now, if we look at, I will have a poll now. And Andre, if you can help me with this one, please. Just just tell us which cluster of KPIs interest you the most, and also the one you find most challenging when measuring performance. And then we will correlate the results of this poll with the results of our performance benchmarking report series, and see if they are the same. We will have, let's say, 30 seconds for you to answer the poll. I guess that would be enough. A few more seconds, about 5 more seconds, and mm, okay, I guess we could end the poll now, as everyone answered. And from the results I have here, I see that 50% of you answered that operations are the most challenging um, cluster of KPIs when measuring performance, which is actually one of our results as well, as people tend to focus more on the operations cluster. By having a look here, we can see that the operations cluster has 90 KPIs, while the other one, well, corporate governance, for example, which was one of your answers, has only 7 KPIs, and the environmental impact, 24. Um, we will be discussing all of the 5 clusters more in depth in the next half an hour or so. And from what you see here, the structure of the report, basically it contains 257 KPIs, and they are which are most common within the industry. They are structured in 5 clusters, which we consider as an integrated framework. And we have noticed that professionals tend to focus on internal organizational matters, such as operations or human capital, but also for electricity utilities, as you can see here, customers are also very important as they tend to measure it very thoroughly. Now, I would like to start by talking about the context of the electricity sector, which is and the challenges electricity sector faces. And we can see that an increased competition in the market puts a lot of pressure on electricity utilities nowadays. And although they are one of the fastest growing form of energy, and they also face an increase in the demand, they have to consider reducing their environmental footprint, reducing their green gas emissions, and also reducing the usage of coal for these purposes, but also abide to an increasing number of external regulations. So this makes a rigorous monitoring of the performance of electricity utilities a prerequisite of their success. And moreover, it is very important to make sure that within the electricity utility, you are measuring the correct KPIs, you are measuring a framework, you are measuring integrated KPIs, interconnected KPIs, in order to make sure and to enable you to take the correct actions when needed. Hence, we will now analyze more in-depth KPIs we found as key for the industry for each cluster, as I was telling you, and also for each subcluster of our report. And we will start with operations, which was considered by you one of the most challenging ones. Now, our operations cluster contains 90 KPIs, and most of them, as seen in practice, are related to power sources, which is basically the starting point of the entire process, especially in a context where electricity utilities, as we said, need to reduce their coal consumption or use environmental friendly inputs. For electricity production companies, they can report both the net electricity generation and the net production, as you can see in the histogram on screen, or have a more granular approach, as it's the case here. The case presented in the histogram shows electricity production based on the type of input used, such as solar or coal, in this case, hydro, thermal, nuclear, and so on. And we can see that a lot of companies measure not only the output of energy generated by coal, but also the percentage of coal usage in comparison to other sources of energy used. This is, again, referred to the fact that they need to reduce their coal consumption. But however we choose to report this KPI as a total production or have a granular approach, it measures the volume of output, which is electricity generated within a reporting period. After measuring the output, we would need to take a look at the capacity of power generation our organization has. Why is this important for a company? It is because you need to know the power generation volume in relation to the power generation capacity, because it enables a company to take important decision in the case of higher demand, which is one of the challenges that electricity companies are facing nowadays. So maybe one solution in the case of higher demand than your capacity of producing would be to build new generators. My recommendation when measuring these KPIs together is that organizations should report both KPIs in the same unit of measurement, because this will make it easier to analyze the data. Now, for example, if the net electricity production is reported in terawatts per hour, but the installed capacity of power generation is reported as here in megawatts, this would mean that the data has to be standardized, has to be normalized before it is analyzed and before it shows something to the organization. So my recommendation is to use the same unit of measurement, and as it makes the process of analyzing the data easier. Now, another KPI that basically refers to electricity organizations that deal with transmission as well is that they have to measure the capacity of the transmission network, not only the capacity of the production network. This is obviously the next logical step after measuring the inputs and outputs and the generation capacity. Electricity utilities dealing with distribution and transmission should monitor, let's say, as this is the example here, the number of miles or kilometers they cover, especially since we're talking about the fastest growing energy type. Now, in this case, they are they are able to monitor the existing infrastructure, but also compute the growing rate from one reporting period to another. For this measurement, we recommend you to report both the number of miles per type of voltage, as it is the case of Duke Energy, and also consider reporting maybe miles per transmission and distribution, where is the case if you deal with both, or the number of miles or kilometers of overhead lines or underground lines, as this will give you better overview of the infrastructure your company owns, and will enable you to make changes fast and to adapt your infrastructures to the needs of your clients or your future clients. Now, I'm thinking that one objective these KPIs could reflect is optimizing the existing transmission and distribution infrastructure. So they should be under the optimization of the system. Regarding the subcluster electricity interruption, one of the most used KPI for this is the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, which reflects on the reliability of electricity distribution networks and focuses solely on sustained interruptions, not on momentary interruptions. This this can be a challenge for organizations to measure, because it is difficult to report on the system average interruption frequency, as it requires a well-maintained system that records minute data for each power interruption as a minimum duration for defining sustained interruption should be settled. The purpose of this KPI is to indicate on the reliability of electricity supply, and one recommendation for using it in practice would be to have a collection system of accurate or real-time information from your distribution grids, which will allow you to see and determine the cause of the outage very fast. Maybe also assessing the technology and implementing new technologies that will determine causes and faults would also be helpful. I would like to move to the next cluster now, which is the human capital. None of you said that this is a challenge in measuring, and from practice, we've seen that companies in the electricity industry still tend to focus on this cluster, since we have 68 KPIs. They're related to workforce profile, professional development, as you can see, employee satisfaction, and just a little bit about health and safety. But special attention is given to workforce profile. Why would this be? Is because for organizations, these KPIs allow a better resource management and optimization, or ensure a policy of equal chances for men and women. Now, for example, if you see the histogram, Horizon Utilities has a granular approach when measuring their staff number and separates both full-time from part-time and also permanent from temporary employees. And why would this type of breakdown help is because the managers can take informed decisions when making changes regarding human resources availability, new projects, or how they are optimizing the human resource within the company. Regarding the policy of equal chances, as I've told you earlier, I consider it key because at a global level, more and more emphasis is put on offering equal chances to men and women. I know that the electricity industry is very risky, and it is associated with men in general. So basically, these numbers, and this could be one of the reasons that men tend to be more involved in these kind of activities. And also, as we can see from the results we have from Dong Energy, which has quite a granular approach. As you can see, they measure percentage of women and men involved in different levels of leadership or management within the company. In most of the cases, the percentage of men in leadership is more than double than the case of women. I consider this a clear area of improvement, and in order to improve, obviously we need to measure it. So starting from measuring this KPI and seeing exactly how it is related helps us improve. And I also recommend using percentage because this will give very clear information, and you don't have to measure over and over again the number of females and then just correlate it with men. Just having it as a percentage helps managers take decision faster. Moving to the next subcluster, which is employee satisfaction, we can say that this is something most employers want to achieve. We consider Dong Energy here a good example. Why would this be? It's because they measure both loyalty and satisfaction together. And I think that comparing the results of these two KPIs gives more in-depth information, gives a better image of the whole situation. So let's look at the numbers for a second. In most cases, you see that employee loyalty scored more than the satisfaction. Basically, this can tell us that the employees are loyal to the company. They are not considered to leave the company. They are not willing to leave, but their satisfaction level is lower because maybe they expect something more for their loyalty to the employer. In this case, organizations can offer more facilities, and a recommendation would be to conduct a questionnaire within the organization and find out exactly why they could, what they could improve, what's the area of improvement most employees are expecting in order to increase their satisfaction. These two indicators could be measured in relation to turnover as well, which measures the rate at which employees leave the organization within a given time period. Now, imagine this together. So low employee satisfaction and loyalty scores can be used as a forewarning warning for an increase in turnover. Of course, the objective of most organizations is to maintain the turnover rates within a given range because it's natural for some employees to leave the company. But high rates of turnover would not be in the interest of the organization, as it invests in their employees, training, money, time to teach them, and so on. So you want to keep most of your employees, especially the ones that are well performing and the one that have that could grow fast to a well performing employee. What is one of the facilities that can be offered in order to increase the satisfaction and decrease the turnover is training. And speaking of training, the next KPI discussed focuses on professional development of the employees. And we've seen that most electricity utilities use the average training hours per employee as one of their leading KPIs to measure the professional development. Keeping this KPI within range helps organization measure an objective such as maintaining a continuous professional development culture within the company, for example. Taking care of the professional development of the employees can surely help rise the level of satisfaction the employees have, and also the confidence at what they do, or can address certain lacks they might have, hence improving their on-the-job performance. This can be beneficial both for the company and for the employee. For the employee, it is quite obvious. Why I'm saying that this can be beneficial to the company is because training, once it helps your employee develop the needed skills, they work better, they work faster. Also can help them if they are transferred to different departments or operate new technologies. So it gives them a sense of being good at what they being good at what they do. It can also let's just say reconfirm that they're doing the right thing. It can help them with new technologies, and if their work is better, is faster, and they are confident in what they're doing, they will surely start being more satisfied. This KPI, from my experience, should be monitored along with performance reviews of the employees, because it will help electricity utilities companies or the managers of these companies to assess the impact of training on their employees. Now, the next subcluster, as I said, which is not highly monitored from what we've seen in practice, is health and safety. I put here an example, which is the number of fatalities. And luckily, we can see that both our examples have improved their performance in 2015. And what I think that health and safety is important for an electricity company is given their risky environment in which their employees work. Hence, measuring number of hazards or incidents produced or even fatalities can help organizations better manage their system, invest maybe in new infrastructure, equipment, training, as we said earlier. And in this case, their people would be better prepared to use the existing infrastructure, and the risks are reduced. Before moving to the next cluster, I would like to remind you that I would like your input, and please consider further study or further benchmarking initiative, and consider if you would like to be part of of this type of initiative? And if yes, please contact us, and we will be discussing with each one of you. Maybe we are considering of doing a primary study, and we would really appreciate your involvement. The next cluster we consider important for a measurement framework within electricity industry would be customer and their satisfaction. Obviously, this is the main interest of all organizations because this is where the profit comes from. And what is it important to measure within the electricity sector for the customer and for their satisfaction? Well, this cluster for our report includes 68 KPIs, as well as the one from human resources. And from our findings, clearly customer satisfaction and market distribution are the subclusters with most KPIs, and they are most emphasized than the rest. Surely, measuring the number of customers is a common practice within all organizations, not just electricity utilities. And as we have seen, the electricity industry companies focus more on a granular approach, meaning they measure residential customers, industrial customers, and they measure them by per type of customers. As you can see in the histogram here, we have the one for residential. Or they tend to measure each type as a percentage, not a number, as the case here for GEPCO. This is, of course, important to correlate with the sales or with the revenue that comes from each cluster, because this number solely only tells you the let's say only tells you your market from experience. Industrial customers will surely pay more than the one domestic customer. So by looking at this number and correlating it with the sales, maybe the company can change their strategy depending on what they want. In this case, maybe they want to go for more industrial customers and expand in that area. Customer satisfaction as key is usually measured as percentage of customer satisfaction with the service overall out of the total number of customers, but it can also be measured as a breakdown. The breakdown, as you can see, can take various forms and will help organization know exactly what is their biggest issue or what they need to solve as soon as possible. They will help prioritize their time and resources and their projects. It can be either, for example, low voltage complaints, which helps the company understand that if these are this is the biggest number of complaints received, and they are directed towards low voltage, they need to solve this issue faster than the other ones. It can be complaints received about the reliability of supply or interruptions, and I don't know, billing accuracy, and so on. I recommend the approach of the granular measurement because it enables organizations, as I was saying, to track faster the issue and prioritize and start working on solving them faster, as they are the ones that bother their customer most. Some other recommendations of KPIs which you could measure in order to maintain a high customer satisfaction, which could be one of your objectives for this particular cluster is related to complaints management, and solve complaints within the SLA should be, I guess, the main focus. As you can see here, um, the solved complaints are measured again on a granular approach. And surely, if you measure the complaints received solved after 60 days, and you have a high number, this indicates that you need to readjust and start working on your customer service and see where the issue is and why the complaints are solved so late. But usually, measuring and making sure you resolve most complaints within the SLA is especially important for the customer service department because of the particular environment of electricity utilities, which is a basic need, and customers will want their problems, especially if they are dealing with interruption issues. They would want their problems solved as soon as possible in order to have the service back as soon as possible. The next cluster, which is environmental impact, is a key, as we've mentioned from the beginning. There are 24 KPIs in this cluster in our report, but when discussing about environmental impact, I've told you from the beginning that organizations within the electricity industry have to abide a lot of external regulations, and they have a lot of environmental related regulations to abide from, and also they have to make sure they are reducing their coal consumption. So when discussing this environmental impact, companies focus more on green gas emissions or on waste management. As you can see in the example of the indicator measuring the green gas emissions, they measure the total green gas and also by type of input that produces the green gas. So if we check the numbers in here, we can understand why it is important to reduce the coal, because it's the one that produces the most green gas emissions. And why I believe this is the most frequent indicator measured is given the great impact of green gas on our planet, and this is why it's given so much attention. By maintaining their emissions within a range or as low as possible, let's say between the range of the regulations or maybe lower, electricity utilities help reduce their negative effects on the planet and help delay some negative transformation of the planet, such as the rise of water scarcity, which will also affect themselves, and they will affect their production of hydroelectricity. So this is intercorrelated with the needs of the organization, not only the planet or not only the external regulators. The same applies when talking about waste management, and closer monitoring of these KPIs, whether it's the total of waste or a breakdown, as we can see here, helps control the environmental footprint of the organization, not only reducing the negative impact on the environment, but also the negative repercussions which the company might face if it doesn't comply to those regulations, such as receiving more complaints environmental-wise, or even convictions from the authorities. So consider when measuring the environmental footprint of your organization, not only the fact that you have to do this and not only the fact that this is an external need, but also consider you help your organization and you help your customers as well. Lastly, we have reached the corporate governance part, and from practice, the effectiveness of corporate governance, and I've seen that some of you said that corporate governance during the poll is challenging. Well, it kind of is, because as we've seen from practice, this is given actually too little significance. And organizations from the electricity sector, we have noticed that emphasize on a breakdown on number of meetings or advisory services or agenda items or even management suggestions. I think it is important to take care of to measure your corporate governance and take into consideration all these KPIs as they will help you manage your as they will help you manage your organization better. Now, in the end, I would like to tell you that please don't forget to tell us how does your organization measure the effectiveness of corporate governance. We would be very interested to see how you do this in practice, and maybe for other clusters as well. And also remember that we are planning to deploy a primary benchmarking study for the utility sector. This also includes electricity, and we will be very happy and interested in having you involved in such a study. So I will be waiting for you to write either on this chat or send us an email afterwards, and someone will get in contact with you and set the details. Now let's revise the webinar, today's webinar. So we have learned that resource optimization is key, and having a breakdown measurement could help electricity utilities manage their resources or manage their environmental footprint better. We have learned that efficiency in operations and customer management are seen as fundamental areas for electricity organizations. A good human resource management would help you identify even underlying issues in other departments, or will help you maintain all or most of your employees engaged within and loyal to your organization. We've learned that compliance with environmental regulations is not only mandatory, but helpful for the organization itself. We have had some in-practice recommendations for the leading KPIs we've discussed. And please remember that having an integrated measurement framework with KPIs interconnected for each cluster is important when monitoring performance, as it gives you a better overview, and it gives you it shows better what are your next actions and what can be changed. Thank you very much for joining this webinar.
Thank you very much, Alina, for your presentation. And now we shall proceed with the Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions, you are free to address them now. Earlier, while the webinar was going on, we received a question, and that was, in your opinion, Alina, what is your definition of employee loyalty? What do you understand by that?
By employee loyalty, I understand that the employees are not willing to leave the company or are not considering to leave the company, so they are still engaged and they are still willing to remain and participate to the improvement of the company and so on.
All right, I hope that provides a satisfactory answer, and if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to address them now. All right, we've received a second question. So,
Yes.
how do you manage to approach the normalization of values to be able to enable comparisons between organizations? For example, organizations that operate in the rural area versus those that operate in the urban area. Are there any ways of normalizing values to get an average for both, which is somewhat representative, and also values that allow for comparisons?
Okay. I understand your question, and to some extent, it can be done if you take into consideration the the values you have for one particular KPI and correlated with the number of the number of customers, if it's a customer related issue, that the organization that both organizations have. So somehow you have to, let's say, make a a rate between the actual result of the KPI and the number of customers. But in my recommendation, given how electricity utilities, given their environment and given how they work, I would um, I would suggest you to compare yourselves with with companies that have more or less the same number of employees, the same number of customers, maybe the same geographical the same geographical region that they work within, because one of the issues would also be that weather or the geographical conditions can affect the or electricity utilities. So my recommendation would be to focus on organizations which are more or less the same and operate in more or less the same environment, and not go um, to not compare yourselves with larger organizations, or if you're a local organization operating in maybe one city, don't compare yourselves with organizations that operate at a regional level or in way larger cities that have basically have different needs. I hope this answers your question. And if not, you can send an email or right now in the chat, and we can rediscuss it.
All right, and now another question would be, how can you measure performance in relation to innovation?
To measure performance in relation to innovation.
Yes, how would you measure the innovation performance, so to say?
Innovation performance of electricity utilities. Okay. I believe that innovation within the electricity utilities should focus on renewable energies or new power sources that organizations can use in order to reduce their environmental footprint. And I also think that innovation could work very well within within the technology side. So to use innovation, technology innovation in order to make your operations more efficient. But as I said, most of the clusters are highly regulated, so you still need to report and make sure your framework of measuring performance is correlated with the requirements of uh, reporting you have to do. But I do consider that innovation is key for the operations part.
All right.
Do we have any other question, or Andrei?
We've received another question right now. Have you seen evidence of measurement of smart meters coming through?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
So, have you seen any evidence of the measurement of smart meters coming through, as in becoming becoming useful and relevant?
I have seen no evidence or of such when deploying this benchmarking study. So I think for this benchmarking study, we have no evidence of sort.
All right, we have a few more minutes for any other questions if anyone wants to ask anything.
I will, however, make sure to come back to the answer with smart mirrors, and I will do some research on this topic correlated with our report, and come back with an answer as soon as possible to the whoever asked this question.
All right, we've received one more question, and it will be the final one as we are running out of time. What, in your opinion, is the most important KPI to measure the financial performance of an electricity company?
The financial performance, which is one of the most important KPIs.
Yes, in your opinion.
I would really like to keep this for the next webinar because it will be based on financial KPIs for all three sectors, if that's okay. And we will be discussing exactly this topic.
All right. Thank you very much for your questions and your answers. And this brings us to the end of the Q&A session and of the webinar. Alina, do you have any last words for our listeners?
Thank you very much for joining the webinar, and thank you for your interactions. I really enjoyed your questions, and I hope to have you back at the webinar that we are going to make on financial KPIs for utilities. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you very much once again. The KPI Institute appreciates your interest in the webinar Performance Benchmarking for the Electricity Utilities Industry. Follow our websites and our social media channels to find out more details and to subscribe to our next webinar, 10 KPIs to measure and build upon for search engine optimization success, which will be held on the 2nd of July by Olivia Ambreda, a digital marketing manager for the KPI Institute. Also, if you're interested in getting a certification granted by the KPI Institute on vital areas within the performance management discipline, you can explore our scheduled courses on marketplace.kpiinstitute.org. Thank you again for your participation and have a nice day.